The last words my father ever typed were, "The defendant showed no remorse." 3 hours later, his heart stopped in the courthouse parking lot, and I inherited his gift for reading the silence between words. Sarah Miller pressed her fingertips against the cold metal of Lincoln High's entrance doors, feeling the vibration of 800 teenagers living their Monday morning chaos on the other side. The September heat was already oppressive at 7:45, making her black jeans stick to her legs. She'd chosen them deliberately black jeans. Gray hoodie, earbuds in but no music playing. The uniform of invisibility. 6 weeks since Dad's funeral. 37 days since she'd packed up their apartment in Houston, shoving his court reporter equipment into boxes she couldn't bear to open. 24 hours since Uncle David had dropped her off at his 2-bedroom rental, carefully chosen to be walking distance from Lincoln High, but far enough that no one would connect her to the superintendent's office downtown. Just be a normal kid, Uncle David had said, his version of comfort. That's what Ben would have wanted. But normal kids didn't grow up in courtroom galleries, learning to read body language like other children learned multiplication tables. Normal kids didn't fall asleep to the rhythmic clicking of stenotype machines or spend summers organizing case files marked with words like assault and negligence and wrongful death. If you're feeling that rush of what's going to happen next, hit that like button. It really helps more people discover these stories. And if you want to share where you're watching from, drop it in the comments below. For those who want to support more stories like this one, there's a thanks button right under this video. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps me bring you more inspiring tales of courage and standing up for what's right. Thank you for being here. Now, let's see what happens when push comes to shove. Sarah pulled open the door and stepped into the current of teenage energy. The main hallway stretched before her like a crime scene she hadn't examined yet. Evidence everywhere if you knew how to look. The way groups clustered and shifted. The careful distances maintained. The kid by the water fountain who kept checking over his shoulder. New girl. The voice cracked across the hallway like a gavel. Sarah's body recognized the tone before her mind catalogued it authority. Performed for an audience. She'd heard it 1,000 times in witness testimony, the voice of someone who needed you to know they were in charge. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the hallway like he owned the tile beneath his feet. 6'2", maybe 220, with the kind of muscles that came from 2-a-day practices and whatever else Texas football culture demanded. His Letterman jacket hung open despite the heat, displaying a chest that seemed inflated beyond normal proportions. 3 other players flanked him, their formation as practiced as any play. Sarah kept walking. In courtrooms, the first rule was never volunteer information. "I'm talking to you." Still walking. 10 feet to the turn for her first period English class. But Jake Morrison moved with the explosive speed that had earned him his scholarship offers, planting himself in her path, up close. She could see the details that mattered: the slight tremor in his jaw muscle, the way his pupils seemed too dilated for the fluorescent lighting, the sheen of sweat that had nothing to do with temperature. "You deaf or just stupid?" His voice carried that particular edge of someone used to immediate compliance. Sarah pulled out one earbud, a calculated gesture of minimal cooperation. "Neither." "Then you should know when Jake Morrison talks. You stop and listen." Behind him, his teammates snickered on cue. But Sarah was watching the freshman by the water fountain, the one who'd been nervous before. The kid had gone rigid, pressing himself against the wall like he could disappear into the paint. "Fascinating," Sarah said, her voice deliberately flat. "But I have English." She stepped to the left. Jake matched her. To the right, matched again, the dance of intimidation, choreographed by 1,000 bullies before him. But Sarah had watched her father record the testimony of men who'd killed their wives, who'd beaten their children, who'd destroyed lives, and then sat in witness chairs lying through their teeth. Jake Morrison's attempt at menace was amateur hour. "You're not from here," Jake said. It wasn't a question. "Houston?" Sarah offered, knowing he'd find out anyway. "Why'd you move?" Here was the moment. The story she'd rehearsed with Uncle David, stripped of identifying details. "My dad died, moved in with family." Something flickered across Jake's face. Not sympathy, but calculation. Weakness identified. Catalogued for future use. "That sucks," he said. The words performative as everything else. "Here's the thing about Lincoln High. There's a natural order. I'm at the top. You—" His eyes traveled down her deliberately nondescript outfit. "You're nowhere. You stay nowhere. We won't have problems." The freshman by the water fountain had started edging away, trying to escape while Jake's attention was elsewhere. Jake's peripheral vision caught the movement. His entire body language shifted. Predator, locking onto prey. "Martinez." The name cracked like a whip. "Where you think you're going?" The kid Martinez froze. Couldn't have been more than 14, maybe 90 pounds after a heavy meal. His backpack looked like it weighed more than he did. "Just class," Martinez whispered. "Just class?" Jake mimicked, his voice pitched high and mocking. His teammates laughed harder. "You forget something!" Martinez's hand shook as he reached into his pocket, pulling out a crumpled $20 bill. Jake snatched it, examined it like it might be counterfeit, then shoved it in his pocket. "That's for today. You're behind for last week." "I paid last week," Martinez said, barely audible. Jake's expression darkened. "You calling me a liar?" This was it. The moment Sarah's father had taught her to recognize in testimony when violence shifted from potential to inevitable. Jake's weight transferred to his back foot. His right hand curled into a fist. Martinez saw it too. Raising his arms instinctively, Sarah's hand moved without conscious thought. Phone sliding from her pocket. Thumb finding the record button by muscle memory. The angle was bad, shooting from her hip. But audio would be clear. Texas was a one-party consent state. Dad had drilled that into her head, along with proper transcript formatting. Jake's fist drove into Martinez's stomach with a sound like a baseball hitting a pillow. The kid doubled over, gasping. Jake grabbed his hair, yanking his head back. "I said, are you calling me a liar?" "No," Martinez wheezed. "Then you owe me for last week. Another 20 by tomorrow, or—" The impact came fast. Jake slammed Martinez's head sideways into the metal water fountain, not hard enough to knock him out, but hard enough to split skin. Blood immediately began seeping from a cut above Martinez's eyebrow. "Shit, Jake," one of his teammates muttered. "There's cameras." Jake laughed. "Where they took them down for maintenance last month. Remember? Besides." He glanced around the hallway, at the 30-odd students who were carefully looking anywhere else. Nobody saw anything. Right. The silence was suffocating. Sarah understood it, recognized it from 100 testimonies where witnesses suddenly developed amnesia on the stand. Fear was its own language, and everyone here was fluent. Jake released Martinez, who slumped against the wall, one hand pressed to his bleeding face. "Get to the nurse," Jake said, magnanimous now. "Tell her you tripped, and remember 20 by tomorrow." Martinez stumbled away, leaving small drops of blood on the tile like breadcrumbs. Jake turned back to Sarah, his entire demeanor shifting back to casual threat. "So, new girl, we understand each other." Sarah's phone was still recording in her hand. 3 minutes and 17 seconds of clear audio. Probably decent video, despite the angle. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Evidence is only as good as what you can do with it." "Perfectly," she said. Jake's eyes narrowed slightly, something in her tone catching his attention. But the warning bell rang, and the hallway erupted into motion. He stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy. "Welcome to Lincoln High," he said. "Try to last longer than the last new kid." Sarah walked past him, feeling his eyes track her movement. Her hands were steady. Dad would have been proud, but her mind was racing. She'd been here less than 10 minutes and already understood the ecosystem. Jake Morrison wasn't just a bully. He was running an actual extortion ring. Systematic and practiced. The missing cameras weren't coincidence. The other students' silence wasn't just fear, it was trained. She found her English class and slipped into a back corner seat. Her phone burned in her pocket. 3 minutes and 17 seconds of evidence. But evidence of what? Exactly assault. Obviously, extortion. But in her father's world, the obvious crime was usually just the surface. Mrs. Patterson, the English teacher, was already writing on the board. "Today we're discussing To Kill a Mockingbird. Who can tell me about the symbolism of the courtroom scenes?" Sarah almost laughed. Of course they were, as students offered tentative answers about justice and prejudice. Sarah pulled out her notebook, but instead of notes on Harper Lee, she found herself writing what her father had taught her. Building a case, he'd said, was like building a house. Foundation first. Known facts. Jake Morrison, senior, football captain, running extortion scheme. Violent. Protected cameras, conveniently broken. Other students terrified into silence. Questions. How long has this been happening? How many victims? Where does the money go? Who else knows? Her pen hesitated over the last question. In her experience, someone always knew. Teachers who looked the other way. Administrators who found excuses. Parents who preferred successful football programs to difficult questions. Miss Miller, Sarah's head snapped up. Mrs. Patterson was looking at her expectantly, along with half the class. "I asked if you'd like to share your thoughts. You seem to be taking extensive notes." Sarah glanced down at her notebook, at the careful analysis that had nothing to do with American literature. Just connecting it to personal experience. "Oh," Mrs. Patterson's expression softened. "Would you like to elaborate?" The moment stretched. Sarah could feel the other students' curiosity. Their evaluation. First impressions mattered. Her father had said. They shaped every testimony that followed. "My father worked in the legal system," Sarah said carefully. "He used to say that the real crime in Macomb wasn't what happened in the courtroom. It was what happened before anyone got there. The silence that let injustice flourish." Mrs. Patterson nodded slowly. "That's a very insightful observation. The complicity of the community." "Yeah," Sarah agreed. "And how fear makes cowards of us all." A girl in the front row turned to look at her. Blonde, cheerleader uniform, the kind of pretty that came with social capital. But there was something in her eyes, recognition, maybe, or warning. The class continued, but Sarah barely heard it. Her mind was constructing scenarios, following logical chains. Jake's behavior was too confident, too systematic. This wasn't teenage bullying escalated to criminal behavior. This was criminal behavior disguised as teenage bullying. When the bell rang, Sarah lingered, letting the classroom empty. The blonde cheerleader paused at her desk. "You're new," the girl said. It wasn't a question. "First day." "Some advice." The girl glanced at the doorway, confirming they were alone. "Whatever you think you saw this morning, you didn't. Whatever you think you recorded, delete it. Jake Morrison's father is the district attorney. You do the math." She was gone before Sarah could respond. District attorney. The words landed like evidence dropping into place. No wonder Jake operated with impunity. His father prosecuted crimes in this county. Who would dare file a complaint? But Sarah's father had taught her that power was like water. It always flowed downhill until something blocked its path. And corruption created its own evidence trail, if you knew where to look. She made it through 3 more classes. Mapping the social geography of Lincoln High. Jake appeared in every period like he was checking on his territory. Different victims, same pattern. A sophomore who owed him for tutoring. A junior who needed to pay for protection. Always careful amounts, 20 here, 40 there, never enough to trigger mandatory reporting, if any teacher was even paying attention. By lunch, Sarah had a decision to make. The cafeteria sprawled before her, its hierarchies as clearly marked as a courtroom seating chart. Jake held court at the center table. His teammates arranged around him like a judicial panel. Martinez sat alone in the far corner, a white bandage over his eyebrow. Sarah bought a sandwich she didn't want and chose a middle table, neutral ground. From here, she could observe without seeming to. Her phone had been burning in her pocket all morning. The video file like radioactive evidence. "You're either brave or stupid." The voice came from behind her. Sarah turned to find a tall black girl in a Lincoln High School resource officer uniform. Not a student too old, too official. The woman sat down across from her without invitation. "Officer," Sarah glanced at the nameplate. "Wells." "Just Janet during lunch," Officer Wells said. "I'm only officially on duty if someone starts bleeding." She paused. "More than they already have. Anyway." Sarah kept her expression neutral, but Officer Wells smiled grimly. "You think I don't know what happens in my halls? I've got 17 incident reports filed this semester alone. You know how many went anywhere?" Sarah could guess. 0. Smart girl. Jake Morrison's been untouchable for 3 years, ever since his growth spurt coincided with his father's election. Officer Wells unwrapped her own sandwich. "But you're not from here. You don't know how things work yet." "I'm learning." "Are you—" Officer Wells studied her. "Because, from where I sit, you look like a girl who saw something she shouldn't have this morning. Maybe even documented it. That would be dangerous thinking." Sarah's hand moved unconsciously toward her pocket. Officer Wells caught the gesture. If, hypothetically, someone had evidence of assault, what would happen to it? Officer Wells laughed, but there was no humor in it. Hypothetically, it would go to the principal, who would express deep concern, then to the district office, where it would be reviewed, then to the DA's office for potential prosecution, where it would mysteriously disappear. Morrison's got this whole town sewn up tighter than— She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes fixing on something over Sarah's shoulder. Sarah didn't need to turn. She could feel Jake's presence like atmospheric pressure dropping. "Officer Wells," Jake's voice was perfectly polite. "How's your son doing? Still hoping for that scholarship to UT?" The threat was surgical in its precision. Officer Wells's jaw tightened. "He's fine. Jake, thanks for asking." "Good to hear. Hate to see anything derail his chances. One bad recommendation. One missed opportunity. Jake let the words hang. But I'm sure that won't be necessary. He moved on, but his message was clear. Even the school resource officer wasn't beyond his reach. Or rather, his father's reach. When he was gone. Officer Wells stood abruptly. Hypothetical advice. Sometimes the system's too broken to fix from inside. Sometimes you need... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Alternative approaches. She left Sarah alone with her uneaten sandwich and racing thoughts. Alternative approaches. Her father had believed in the system, had served it faithfully until it killed him, but he'd also taught her that justice and law weren't always the same thing. Sarah pulled out her phone, opened the video file. 3 minutes and 17 seconds of clear evidence. Jake's face visible, his voice unmistakable. Martinez's blood on the water fountain. But Officer Wells was right. This would disappear into the DA's office like evidence into a black hole. Unless... Her father's voice again. Every case has a pressure point. Find what they're really protecting, and you'll find your leverage. What was Jake really protecting? Not just his reputation or his father's political career. This was bigger. The systematic nature of it. The amounts of money. The infrastructure of fear. This wasn't bullying escalated to crime. This was crime disguised as bullying. The cafeteria was emptying for fifth period. Sarah stood. Decision crystallizing. She couldn't fight Jake Morrison on his terrain, but she could build a case the way her father had taught her, one piece of evidence at a time, until the weight of truth became undeniable. As she headed for her afternoon classes, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, then saw the text preview, "Delete the video or your uncle's career is over." Sarah stopped walking. Uncle David, the superintendent. They knew who she was, which meant Jake had resources beyond just school gossip. Someone in the administration, maybe. Or maybe his father had already run her name through the system. Another text, "You have 1 hour. Don't test me." Sarah looked around the empty hallway. No cameras still conveniently broken. No witnesses. Just her and the weight of a decision that suddenly felt bigger than one morning's violence. If you're feeling that rush of what's going to happen next, hit that like button. It really helps more people discover these stories. And if you want to share where you're watching from, drop it in the comments below. For those who want to support more stories like this one, there's a thanks button right under this video. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps me bring you more inspiring tales of courage and standing up for what's right. Thank you for being here. Now, let's see what happens when push comes to shove. She thought about Martinez's blood on the tile, about Officer Wells's son needing that scholarship, about her father dying in a parking lot, killed by the weight of other people's pain, about Uncle David, who'd taken her in when she had nowhere else to go. 1 hour. Sarah's fingers moved across her phone screen, not to delete the video, but to upload it. Cloud storage, encrypted, then email, to an account Jake wouldn't know about. Then a third backup, just to be sure, because her father had taught her something else, in those long nights reviewing testimony. Power only works if you're afraid of losing something. But when you've already lost everything that matters, you become dangerous in ways people like Jake Morrison couldn't understand. She had 58 minutes to figure out what Jake was really hiding, and she knew exactly where to start looking. Sarah's 58 minutes started in the last place anyone would look, the library's archived yearbooks. Not for photos, but for patterns. Her father had taught her that criminal enterprises always left traces in plain sight, disguised as something else. Jake had been at Lincoln High for 4 years. She pulled yearbooks dating back to his freshman year, spreading them across a back table where the afternoon sun slanted through dusty windows. The football team photos told a story if you knew how to read bodies. Freshman year, Jake was skinny, maybe 160, soaking wet. Rode the bench. Sophomore year, gained 40 pounds of muscle in one summer. Started varsity. Junior year, another 30 pounds. Team captain. Senior year. The Jake she'd met this morning. Swollen beyond normal proportions. But he wasn't the only one. Sarah traced her finger across the team photos, noting the pattern. Players bulked up impossibly fast, dominated for a season or two, then disappeared. Where were last year's seniors? The year before, steroids, she whispered to the empty library. Her phone buzzed. 32 minutes left. Sarah abandoned the yearbooks and headed for the computer lab. The school's network was password protected, but students always found ways around that. Sure enough, someone had taped the Wi-Fi password under the keyboard Warriors 2023. She started with social media, hunting for Lincoln High alumni. It took 12 minutes to find what she was looking for: Marcus Thompson's Instagram. Last year's star linebacker. Full scholarship to Texas A&M. His final Lincoln High post showed him holding the state championship trophy. Jake grinning beside him. Then nothing for 3 months. Then a single photo from a hospital bed. Marcus in a wheelchair. The caption sparse, "God has a plan." Sarah screenshotted everything and kept digging. The comments told the story in fragments. "Praying for you, bro. Stay strong. Can't believe what happened." She found a news article buried in the local paper's online archive. Former Lincoln High star hospitalized after workout incident. Vague details about a medical emergency during summer training. No mention of cause. 15 minutes left. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard. If Jake was distributing steroids, there had to be a money trail. The $20 extortions weren't enough. That was pocket change. Walking around money. The real profit would be in bulk sales. She thought about Jake's trembling jaw, his dilated pupils. Users often became dealers to support their own habits. But a high school kid couldn't source pharmaceutical-grade steroids alone. He needed a supplier, someone with access. The answer came like testimony clicking into place: the coaching staff. Her phone rang. Unknown number. 7 minutes left. "Hello." "You're not as smart as you think." Jake's voice, but different. Strained. Scared. "Meet me in the field house. Alone. Bring your phone." "Why would I?" "Because if you don't, Martinez bleeds again, and this time, it won't be just his face." The line went dead. Sarah sat frozen for a moment. This was escalation beyond teenage bullying. This was conspiracy to commit assault, kidnapping, criminal threats. Jake was either desperate or confident. Neither option was good. She forwarded all her screenshots to her backup email, then sent a quick message to Officer Wells. "Fieldhouse, come in 10 minutes. Then she deleted the sent message. If Jake had her phone records, at least there'd be a trail. The fieldhouse squatted behind the main building like a concrete toad. The door was propped open, fluorescent lights humming inside. Sarah could smell it before she entered: sweat and disinfectant, and something else. Fear. Maybe. Or her own adrenaline. Jake stood in the center of the wrestling mats, still in his Letterman jacket despite the stifling heat. But he wasn't alone. 3 other players flanked him, and Martinez sat on a bench, zip-tied to a weight rack. "Phone," Jake said. Sarah held it up. "Let him go first." "You're not in a position to negotiate." But Jake's voice cracked slightly, up close. She could see he was sweating profusely, his pupils blown wide. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into." "Enlighten me." Jake laughed, high and manic. "You think this is about lunch money? You think I'm just some stupid bully." "I think you're a dealer," Sarah said calmly. "Steroids. Probably HGH too. I think you've been juicing since sophomore year and got half the team hooked. I think you're supplied by someone on the coaching staff. And I think you're all about to get buried by federal trafficking charges." The silence was deafening. One of Jake's teammates, Santos, she thought, took a step back. "Jake, man!" "You said this was just—" "Shut up." Jake's control frayed. "She doesn't know anything. She's guessing." "Marcus Thompson," Sarah said. "Paralyzed from a steroid-induced stroke during summer workouts. You supplied him. That's assault with a deadly weapon. 25 to life." I didn't." Jake's hands clenched and unclenched. "Marcus took too much. It wasn't my fault." There it was. Admission. "Is that what you tell yourself?" Sarah kept her voice steady. "What about the others? Tommy Chen dropped out after liver damage. Brian Kowalski, heart arrhythmia at 17. How many more?" "Jake, you don't understand." Jake exploded. "You think I wanted this? You think I chose this?" He ripped off his Letterman jacket, revealing arms tracked with injection sites. "My dad's been planning my life since I was 5. Football scholarship or military academy. No other options. When I couldn't bulk up naturally, Coach Hendricks pulled me aside, said he could help, said everyone does it." "Coach Hendricks," Sarah repeated, another name for the case file. $1,500 a month. Jake continued, spiraling. "That's what the shit costs. Real pharmaceutical grade, not street trash. Where was I supposed to get that money?" "So yeah, I dealt. I recruited. I became the monster my father wanted." "Jake," Santos said urgently. "Shut up, man. You're confessing." But Jake was beyond caring. The mask had cracked, revealing something raw and desperate underneath. "You know what the worst part is? I'm dying. We all are. Marcus was just the first. My liver's failing. Doctor said I've got maybe 2 years if I stop now. But if I stop, no scholarship, no future, no father." Sarah's phone was still recording, every word evidence, but something shifted in her chest. Jake Morrison wasn't just a bully. He was a victim too, trapped in a cycle of abuse that went all the way up. "There's another way," she said. "Testify. Flip on the whole operation. Federal prosecutors love cooperating witnesses. Testify against Coach Hendricks, against my father." "Your father." Sarah's mind raced. "He knows." Jake's laugh was bitter. "Who do you think Coach Hendricks's lawyer is? Who do you think made sure Marcus's medical records stayed sealed? Who do you think threatened Officer Wells's son?" The pieces clicked. District Attorney Morrison wasn't just protecting his son from bullying charges. He was protecting a criminal conspiracy that went to the heart of Lincoln High's football dynasty. "Then testify against all of them," Sarah said, "or die at 19 protecting the people who killed you." The fieldhouse door burst open, not Officer Wells too early. Coach Hendricks himself, 6'4" of former NFL muscle gone to fat. Behind him, 2 assistant coaches. "What's going on here?" Hendricks's voice boomed. His eyes took in the scene. Martinez tied up, Jake unraveling, Sarah standing calm in the center. "Jake, What did you do?" "She knows," Jake said simply. "Everything?" Hendricks moved faster than a man his size should. He crossed the mat in 3 strides, hand reaching for Sarah's phone. She sidestepped, but one of the assistants grabbed her arm. "Let her go!" Jake shouted. "It's over! Coach, I'm done." "You're done when I say you're done," Hendricks snarled. "You think you can just walk away? You think—" The fieldhouse door opened again. This time it was Officer Wells, hand on her service weapon, behind her. Someone Sarah didn't expect Principal Coleman. "Hands where I can see them," Officer Wells commanded. "Everyone, now!" The assistant released Sarah's arm. Hendricks stepped back, calculating. The principal surveyed the scene with an expression Sarah couldn't read. "Officer Wells," Principal Coleman said slowly, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Sarah said. "Jake Morrison just confessed to dealing steroids supplied by Coach Hendricks. I have it all recorded. Martinez is zip-tied to that weight rack. That's kidnapping and false imprisonment." "Young lady," Coleman started. "My name is Sarah Miller." She interrupted. "My uncle is Superintendent David Miller, and in about 30 seconds, the FBI task force he's been coordinating with is going to come through that door." Everyone froze. Even Hendricks. "You're bluffing," Coleman said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Sarah smiled, her father's smile, the one he wore when a hostile witness walked into a trap. "Principal Coleman, when was the last time you checked the athletic department's budget? Specifically, the line items for nutritional supplements, the ones you've been signing off on for 3 years." Coleman went pale. The door burst open one final time. FBI agents in tactical gear, weapons drawn. "Everyone on the ground, now." As chaos erupted, Sarah kept her eyes on Jake. He was crying. She realized, not from fear or anger, but what looked like relief. The weight of his secret finally lifted, even if it meant his world was ending. 2 hours later, Sarah sat in the former principal's office, since Coleman was in custody giving her statement to a federal agent. Uncle David sat beside her, having broken every speed limit getting there from downtown. "You should have called me," he said for the 5th time. "They were monitoring my phone. Besides," Sarah looked at him, "you were already working with the FBI. You knew something was happening at Lincoln High." David sighed. "I suspected, but suspicion isn't evidence. We needed someone on the inside. And I walked right into it." "Ben would have been proud," David said quietly. "And terrified, but mostly proud." Through the window, Sarah could see the parking lot filling with news vans. By tomorrow, the story would be everywhere. Lincoln High's championship football program built on performance-enhancing drugs. The district attorney protecting the conspiracy. Players damaged, some permanently. "What happens to Jake?" she asked. The FBI agent, Special Agent Chen, looked up from her notes. "He's looking at federal distribution charges, but given his cooperation and age, probably a deferred prosecution agreement, mandatory rehab, testimony against the adult defendants." "He's dying," Sarah said. "Liver failure from the steroids." "We'll make sure he gets medical care," Chen assured her. "The others, too. We've identified 14 current players showing signs of abuse. They're victims as much as perpetrators." A knock at the door. Officer Wells entered, escorting someone Sarah didn't recognize, a middle-aged woman with Jake's eyes and facial structure. "Mrs. Morrison." Agent Chen stood. "Thank you for coming." Emma Morrison looked exhausted but determined. "I have recordings," she said without preamble. 3 years' worth. My husband discussing the steroid program. threatening witnesses, coordinating with school officials. She pulled a flash drive from her purse. "I've been documenting everything for my divorce attorney. But this is bigger than a divorce now." She turned to Sarah. "You're the girl Jake mentioned, the one who stood up to him." Sarah nodded. "Thank you," Emma Morrison said simply, "for giving him a way out, even if it means prison." "It doesn't have to," Sarah said, "not if he helps take down the whole network." Over the next months, the investigation expanded like ripples from a stone. 17 arrests, including coaches from 3 different high schools. A federal lawsuit against the district. Texas state legislation on mandatory drug testing for high school athletes. Jake Morrison testified for 8 hours before a grand jury, detailing the entire operation. His father was indicted on 37 counts ranging from conspiracy to obstruction of justice. Coach Hendricks got 15 years federal time. But the part that mattered to Sarah came later, 6 months after that day in the field house. She stood before the school board presenting her proposal. Know Your Rights program, mandatory education for all Texas high school students on their legal protections against bullying, assault, and coercion. Jake was in the audience, 50 pounds lighter and in recovery. Marcus Thompson was there too, still in his wheelchair but enrolled in pre-law at UT Austin. Even Martinez showed up. The scar above his eyebrow faded but not forgotten. My father used to say that silence in the courtroom speaks louder than words. Sarah concluded her presentation. But silence in school hallways. That's where injustice takes root. We need to teach kids not just their rights, but how to use them, how to document, how to report, how to survive when the system fails them. The vote was unanimous. As people filed out, Jake approached her. He looked healthier, though his eyes carried a weight they'd probably never lose. "I start at community college next month," he said. "Thinking about criminal justice. Maybe become a counselor. Help kids before they end up like me." "That's good, Jake." He shifted uncomfortably. "I never said I mean. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but you're right." Sarah interrupted. "Sorry doesn't fix anything. But what you're doing now? That might." Jake nodded and walked away. Sarah watched him go, thinking about cycles of violence, about systems that protected power instead of people, about the courage it took to break free. Her phone buzzed. A message from a student at another school. "I saw your program online. How do I report a teacher who's threatening students?" Sarah smiled and started typing. Her father was gone, but his lessons lived on. In every recording, every testimony, every kid who learned they didn't have to suffer in silence. The courthouse in Houston, where her father died, had an inscription above the entrance, "Justice is truth in action." But Sarah had learned something else. Sometimes justice wasn't about the courthouse at all. Sometimes it was a 16-year-old girl with a phone and the knowledge that even the powerful could be held accountable. Sometimes justice was just refusing to be silent. As she left Lincoln High that day, the security cameras had been fixed. The hallways felt different, still charged with teenage energy, but without the undercurrent of fear. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was better. And that was enough to keep fighting for. 3 years later, Sarah stood in the same courthouse where her father had died, but this time she was on the other side of the bar. Not as a court reporter, but as a witness in the civil trial against Lincoln High School District. The families of Marcus Thompson and 3 other permanently injured players were seeking damages. "Miss Miller," the plaintiff's attorney began, "can you tell the court what happened after your Know Your Rights program was implemented?" Sarah adjusted the microphone, a gesture so familiar it hurt. In the first year alone, we received over 3,000 reports from students across Texas. 47 resulted in criminal prosecutions. 18 school administrators were removed. But more importantly, kids started talking. The silence broke. From the gallery, she could see Emma Morrison, now divorced and running a nonprofit for families affected by sports abuse. Uncle David sat in the back row, graying now but proud, and, in the corner, taking notes on an old-fashioned steno pad, was Jake Morrison. He'd kept his word. Community college led to a bachelor's in social work. Now he traveled to high schools, telling his story. The golden boy who fell from grace and lived to warn others. His liver had partially recovered, though he'd need monitoring for life. A small price, he said, for a second chance. After her testimony, Sarah found herself in the parking lot where her father had collapsed. The space had been turned into a small memorial garden. A plaque read, "Benjamin Miller, Court Reporter," in memory of those who bear witness to truth. While she touched the cold metal, feeling the weight of everything that had led here. Her phone buzzed another student, another school, another cry for help. The work never ended. But as Sarah walked back to her car, she realized something had changed. She wasn't carrying her father's burden anymore. She was carrying her own torch, lighting the way for others lost in institutional darkness. The last words her father typed were about a defendant showing no remorse. But Sarah had learned something different. Sometimes the greatest remorse came from those who found the courage to change. Sometimes justice wasn't just truth in action. Sometimes it was truth in transformation.